Penguin Random House Audio presents The Female Persuasion by Meg Wolitzer. Read for you by Rebecca Lowman. This book is dedicated to Rosalind Brown, Nora Ephron, Mary Gordon, Barbara Grossman, Wren Kidder, Susan Kress, Hilma Wolitzer, Eileen Young, without whom... Part 1. The Strong Ones. Chapter 1. Greer Kadetsky met Faith Frank in October of 2006 at Ryland College, where Faith had come to deliver the Edmund and Wilhelmina Ryland Memorial Lecture. And though that night the chapel was full of students, some of them boiling over with loud-mouthed commentary, it seemed astonishing but true that out of everyone there, Greer was the one to interest Faith. Greer, a freshman then at this undistinguished school in southern Connecticut, was selectively and furiously shy. She could give answers easily, but rarely opinions. Which makes no sense, because I am stuffed with opinions. I am a piñata of opinions, she'd said to Corey during one of their nightly Skype sessions since college had separated them. She'd always been a tireless student and a constant reader, but she found it impossible to speak in the wild and free ways that other people did. For most of her life, it hadn't mattered, but now it did. So what was it about her that Faith Frank recognized and liked? Maybe, Greer thought, it was the possibility of boldness, lightly suggested in the streak of electric blue that zagged across one side of her otherwise ordinary furniture-brown hair. But plenty of college girls had hair partially dipped the colors of frozen and spun treats found at county fairs. Maybe it was just that Faith, at 63, a person of influence and a certain level of fame who had been traveling the country for decades, speaking ardently about women's lives, felt sorry for 18-year-old Greer, who was hot-faced and inarticulate that night. Or maybe Faith was automatically generous and attentive around young people who were uncomfortable in the world. Greer didn't really know why Faith took an interest, but what she knew for sure, eventually, was that meeting Faith Frank was the thrilling beginning of everything. It would be a very long time before the unspeakable end. She had been at college for 7 weeks before Faith appeared. Much of that time, that excruciating build-up, had been spent absorbed in her own unhappiness, practically curating it. On Greer's first Friday night at Ryland, from along the dormitory halls came the ambient roar of a collective social life forming, as if there were a generator somewhere deep in the building. The class of 2010 was starting college in a time of supposed co-ed assertiveness, a time of female soccer stars and condoms zipped confidently inside the pocket of a purse, the ring shape pressing itself into the wrapper like a gravestone rubbing. As everyone on the 3rd floor of Woolley Hall got ready to go out, Greer, who had planned on going nowhere, but instead staying in and doing the Kafka reading for her freshman literature colloquium, watched. She watched the girls standing with heads tilted and elbows jutted, pushing in earrings, and the boys aerosolizing themselves with a body spray called Stadium, which seemed to be half pine sap, half A1 sauce. Then, overstimulated, they all fled the dorm and spread out across campus, heading toward various darkish parties that vibrated with identically shattering bass. Woolley was old and decrepit, one of the original buildings, and the walls of Greer's room, as she'd described them to Corey the day she arrived, were the disturbing color of hearing aids. The only people who remained there after the exodus that night were an assortment of lost, unclaimed souls. There was a boy from Iran who appeared very sad, his eyelashes clustered together in little wet starbursts. He sat in a chair in a corner of the first-floor lounge with his computer on his lap, gazing at it mournfully. When Greer entered the lounge, her room, a rare single, was too depressing to stay in all evening, and she'd been unable to concentrate on her book. She was startled to realize that he was merely looking at his screensaver, which was a picture of his parents and sister, all of them smiling at him from far away. The family image swept across the computer screen and gently bounced against one side before slowly heading back. How long would he watch his bouncing family, Greer wondered. And though she didn't miss her own parents at all, she was still angry with them for what they had done to her, which had resulted in her ending up at Ryland. She felt sorry for this boy. He was away from home on another continent, at a place that perhaps someone had mistakenly told him was a first-rate American college, a center of learning and discovery, practically a school of Athens nestled on the east coast of the U.S. After managing the complicated feat of getting here, he was now alone and quickly becoming aware that this place actually wasn't so great. And besides that, he was also pining for his family. She knew what it was like to miss someone, for she missed Corey so continually and pressingly that the feeling was like its own shattering bass vibrating through her, and he was only 110 miles away at Princeton, not across the world. Greer's sympathies kept collecting and expanding, while in the doorway of the lounge appeared a very pale girl who stood clutching her midsection and asking, "Do either of you have something for diarrhea?" "Sorry, no," said Greer, and the boy just shook his head. The girl accepted their responses with a grim weariness, and then, for lack of anything else to do, she sat down too. Curling through the porous walls came the smell of butter, plus tertiary butyl hydroquinone, alluring but inadequate to the task of cheering anyone up. Moments later, this was followed by the source of the smell, a big plastic tub of popcorn conveyed by a girl in a robe and slippers. "I got the kind with movie theater butter," she said to them as an added inducement, holding out her bowl. Apparently, Greer thought, these are going to be my people. Tonight and perhaps every weekend night. It made no sense. She didn't belong with them. And yet she was among them. She was one of them. So she took a hand-span's worth of popcorn, which was so wet that her fingers felt as if she'd draped them through soup. Greer was about to sit down and attempt a conversation. They could tell one another about themselves, how bleak they felt. She would stay in this lounge, even though Corey had encouraged her earlier not to stay in tonight, but instead to go out to a party or some sort of campus event. "There has to be something going on," he'd said. "Improv. There's always improv." It was her first weekend at college, and he thought she should just try. But she'd said no, she didn't really want to try. She would rather get through it her own way. During the week, she would be a super student, working in a carrel in the library, her head bent over a book like a jeweler with a loupe. Books were an antidepressant, a powerful SSRI. She'd always been one of those girls with socked feet tucked under her, her mouth slightly open in stunned, almost doped-up concentration. All written words danced in a chain for her, creating corresponding images as clear as the boy from Iran's bouncing family. She had learned to read before kindergarten, when she'd first suspected that her parents weren't all that interested in her. Then she'd kept going, plowing through children's books with their predictable anthropomorphism, heading eventually into the strange and beautiful formality of the 19th century and pushing both backward and forward into histories of bloody wars, into discussions of God and godlessness. What she responded to most powerfully, sometimes even physically, were novels. Once, Greer read Anna Karenina for such a long, unbroken bout that her eyes grew strained and bloodshot, and she had to lie in bed with a washcloth over them, as if she herself were a literary heroine from the past. Novels had accompanied her throughout her childhood, that period of protracted isolation, and they would probably do so during whatever lay ahead in adulthood.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?